Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the vast, circular chamber of the Galactic Council, feeling smaller than she ever had in her 43 years of life. The dome stretched impossibly high above her, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. Around her, representatives from 147 different species sat in their designated alcoves, each space carefully designed to accommodate their unique physiologies. The Zephyrian delegate floated in a sphere of pressurized methane gas, its tentacles dancing in patterns that Sarah had learned meant contempt. The massive Krugan ambassador sat on a platform designed to support its rock-like exoskeleton, while the ethereal Viridians seemed to barely exist at all, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy. Sarah adjusted her simple black diplomatic suit and cleared her throat. In this chamber where beings communicated through telepathy, bioluminescence, chemical releases, and frequencies beyond human hearing, her need to make actual sounds felt primitive and embarrassing. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber's translation matrix. "I come before you today, representing the planet Earth and its dominant species, humanity. We formally request membership in the Galactic Council and recognition as a spacefaring civilization." A sound erupted from the Krugan section that the translation matrix rendered as laughter, though it sounded more like grinding stone. Several other species joined in with their own versions of amusement. The Zephyrian's tentacles moved in what Sarah recognized as the gesture for pathetic attempt. Council Prime Zarathul, a Viridian whose form shimmered between purple and gold, spoke without moving what might have been its mouth. The words appeared directly in Sarah's mind, cold and dismissive. "Earth human," the Prime's mental voice dripped with condescension. "Your species has been observed for exactly 73 of your solar cycles. In that time, you have managed to barely escape your own gravity well. You have built crude chemical rockets and established a small outpost on your singular moon. You call this spacefaring?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "We acknowledge that our technology is currently limited compared to the achievements of the council members," she said. "However, humanity has shown remarkable adaptability and innovation in our brief time exploring space. We believe we can contribute unique perspectives and capabilities to the galactic community." This time the laughter was louder and more widespread. The hegemony representative, a spider-like being with 12 legs and eyes that glowed like emeralds, clicked its mandibles in rapid succession. The translation came through as bitter amusement. "Unique perspectives?" the hegemony delegate said. "Young species always believe they have something special to offer. Tell us, human, what exactly makes your kind worth our attention?" Sarah had prepared for this question. She activated the holographic display built into her podium, showing images of human achievements. Cities rising from nothing, art that captured impossible beauty, scientific discoveries that had unlocked the secrets of their world. "Humanity has gone from discovering fire to reaching space in less than 50,000 years, she said, warming to her subject. "We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that would have ended other species. We adapt to any environment, from Arctic ice to desert heat. We have an innate drive to explore, to push boundaries, to never accept that something is impossible." The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles moved in the pattern for delusion of grandeur. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through broken glass. 50,000 years, it said, and somehow the translation conveyed mockery. "Child species. The Zephyrians mastered interstellar travel 4 million years before your sun existed. The Krugan Empire controlled 17 galaxy sectors while your world was still molten rock. What you call achievement, we call the first stumbling steps of an infant." Sarah felt the words like physical blows, but she pressed on. "Perhaps our youth is our strength. We approach problems without the weight of tradition or the assumption that something cannot be done. We have a saying on Earth: necessity is the mother of invention. Throughout our history, humans have found ways to overcome impossible odds through creativity and determination." Council Prime Zarathul's form shifted to a deeper shade of purple, which Sarah had learned indicated growing impatience. "Creativity. the Prime said with mental contempt. You speak of creativity while wearing primitive chemical-based clothing and breathing unfiltered atmospheric gas. Your delegation arrived in a ship that uses fusion propulsion. Fusion, human. Technology that most species abandon when they discover how to manipulate space-time itself. The Prime gestured with what might have been an arm toward the viewing wall, where Earth hung like a small blue marble in the vast darkness. Observe your home world. A single planet, orbited by a single moon. In a system with only one star capable of supporting your specific form of life, you have established exactly 4 off-world settlements, all within your own solar system, all dependent on supply ships from your home planet. You have made contact with no other intelligent species except by our initiation. This is what you call spacefaring achievement? Sarah's jaw tightened. We are a young species. Yes. But in the 73 years since we achieved spaceflight, you have done nothing worthy of our notice, interrupted the Krugan delegate, its voice like an avalanche. Do you know what the Krugan achieved in their first 73 years of spaceflight? We colonized 47 worlds, established trade with 6 different species, and developed technology for faster-than-light communication. What have humans accomplished? You have placed some metal containers in orbit around your world, and sent a few exploratory vessels to nearby rocks. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as galactic laughter. Sarah felt her face burning with humiliation, but beneath the embarrassment, something else was building, something that felt like the controlled fury her grandfather had once described from his time as a military officer. Furthermore, added the hegemony delegate, its mandibles clicking with amusement, your species shows disturbing tendencies toward violence and territorial behavior. Our observation posts have recorded over 300 separate armed conflicts on your world in the past century alone. You cannot even achieve peace among your own kind, yet you wish to join a galactic community? Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. Those conflicts arose from limited resources and misunderstandings. As we expand into space and gain access to the resources of our solar system, such conflicts become unnecessary. We are already seeing decreased tension on Earth as space-based mining operations provide. Irrelevant, the Prime cut her off. The simple fact remains that humanity has demonstrated neither the technological advancement nor the social evolution necessary for Council membership. Your application is denied. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Months of preparation. Years of humanity working toward this moment. All dismissed in seconds. Honored Prime, she said, fighting to keep desperation out of her voice. I ask that you reconsider. Humanity may be young, but we have qualities that could benefit the Council. Our adaptability. Our willingness to take risks. Our ability to find solutions that others overlook. Your primitiveness is exceeded only by your arrogance, the Zephyrian delegate interrupted. You stand before civilizations that have mastered the fundamental forces of reality itself. And you claim to have something we lack. The very suggestion is insulting. Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, searching for any sign of support or even neutral consideration. She found only mockery, contempt, and dismissal. These beings looked at humanity the way humans might look at ants, trying to participate in a university debate. I understand your position, Sarah said carefully. But I ask that you at least grant us observer status. Allow us to learn, to grow, to demonstrate that we can become worthy partners in time. The Krugan delegate's rocky hide shifted in what the translation matrix indicated was extreme amusement. Observer status? It rumbled. For a species that still relies on chemical propulsion and has never left its birth system? We have protocols for dealing with primitive species. When your civilization advances to a level of actual spacefaring capability, you may request another evaluation. Until then, Earth will remain classified as a developing world with restricted contact. What does that mean, exactly? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Prime Zarathul's form brightened to an almost painful intensity. It means, human, that your species is forbidden from leaving your solar system without explicit Council permission. It means that any attempt to establish contact with other civilizations will be prevented. It means that Earth will remain quarantined until such time as you demonstrate actual technological and social advancement. The words fell on Sarah like a crushing weight. Not only had humanity been rejected, they had been caged. For how long? She asked quietly. Until you prove yourselves worthy, the Prime replied. For some species, this takes a few thousand years. For others, tens of thousands. Some never achieve the necessary advancement at all. The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles moved in the pattern for final dismissal. Its voice carried across the chamber with unmistakable finality. Return to your primitive world, human. Teach your species to master their own violent nature. Develop technology that does not embarrass civilized beings. Learn to think beyond the boundaries of a single planet. When you have achieved true spacefaring status, you may ask again for our consideration. Sarah stood in the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by beings whose civilizations spanned millions of years, whose technologies could reshape reality itself, whose empires controlled thousands of worlds. She felt the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on her like an ocean. But beneath the humiliation and disappointment, something else was growing. Something that her species had carried since they first looked up at the stars and dared to dream of reaching them. Something that had driven humans to cross impossible oceans, to climb the highest mountains, to split the atom and decode the secrets of life itself. It was the same force that had pushed her ancestors to leave Africa and populate every continent on Earth, the same drive that had built civilizations in deserts and jungles, that had created art and music and literature that could move souls to tears, the same stubborn, relentless refusal to accept limitations that had taken humanity from stone tools to starships in the blink of an evolutionary eye. I understand the Council's position, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. And I will convey your decision to my government. She began to turn away, then stopped and looked back at the assembled delegates. But I think you should know something about humans, she said quietly. We have a saying on Earth. It's not how many times you fall down that matters. It's how many times you get back up. The Krugan delegate's rocky hide rumbled with what might have been amusement. Pretty words from a primitive species. We shall see if your actions match your rhetoric. Sarah nodded once, formally, to the Council Prime. Yes, she said simply. You will. As she walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast space, Sarah could feel the eyes of 147 different species watching her go. Some with amusement, others with contempt, most with simple indifference. None of them seemed to understand that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They had told humanity they weren't good enough. Back on Earth, in the secure communications room beneath the United Nations building in New York, Sarah's transmission arrived exactly 18 hours after the council session ended. The message was brief, encrypted, and addressed to exactly 7 people who held the most classified clearances in human government. Council decision is final denial, Sarah reported. Quarantine imposed on Sol system. All FTL contact prohibited. Restricted civilization status confirmed. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Recommendation: proceed with Protocol 7, Authorization Code, Prometheus. Time frame: immediate. The message ended, and somewhere in the depths of human space, protocols that had been prepared in secret for exactly this scenario began to activate. Protocols that none of the assembled council delegates could have imagined, because they had made one crucial error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that the primitive beings who stood before them had shown all their cards. They were about to learn that humans had been playing a very different game all along. Admiral Marcus Torres stood in the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, watching as displays showed the positions of every major galactic civilization in real time. The room hummed with quiet efficiency as hundreds of technicians monitored systems that officially did not exist. Status report, Torres said, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in military service. All Shepard stations report ready. Came the reply from Colonel Janet Morrison, his chief of staff. Prometheus packages are armed and deployed. Deep reconnaissance assets confirm target locations. We have eyes on every major council world, trade route, and military installation within 1,000 light-years. Torres nodded, studying the massive holographic display that filled the center of the room. To most observers, it would look like an impossible feat of technology. The ability to track real-time positions of ships and installations across vast interstellar distances should have been beyond human capability. The Galactic Council had been very clear about humanity's limitations. After all, time since Ambassador Chen's transmission? Torres asked. 17 hours, 43 minutes, Morrison replied. All assets report protocol. 7 activation confirmed. We're go for Operation Nightfall. Torres allowed himself a thin smile. For 25 years, ever since humanity's first contact with the Zephyrians, he had been preparing for this moment. While diplomats talked and politicians debated, the military had been working on a simple assumption. If humanity was going to survive in a galaxy full of species that had millions of years head start, they would need to play by different rules. The Galactic Council thought they understood humans. They saw chemical rockets and fusion propulsion, and assumed that was the extent of human capability. They had observed Earth's conflicts and concluded that humans were violent primitives. They had catalogued humanity's brief space presence and decided humans were barely more advanced than cave dwellers. They had never suspected that everything they observed was carefully managed theater. Signal all Prometheus stations, Torres ordered. Authorization code Omega-77. Execute Nightfall in T-60 seconds. Around the command center, technicians bent over their consoles with practiced efficiency. On the main display, icons representing human assets across the galaxy began to pulse with soft red light. Assets that had been positioned and waiting for exactly this moment. Sir, Morrison said quietly, once we do this, there's no going back. The Council will consider it an act of war. Torres looked at her with eyes that had seen 3 different alien species attempt to guide humanity's development through increasingly restrictive trade agreements and territorial limitations. He had watched as the Krugan Empire slowly absorbed smaller civilizations through economic pressure and political manipulation. He had read intelligence reports about what happened to species that remained under development for too long. Colonel, he said softly, they declared war on us the moment they decided to cage us. They just didn't realize it yet. He turned back to the display and spoke clearly into his command microphone. All stations, this is Command Authority Alpha. Execute Nightfall. Show them what humanity really is. Across the galaxy, in deep space locations that the Galactic Council had never detected, human installations that had been hidden and waiting suddenly came alive. The first target was the Zephyrian home system, 1,200 light-years from Earth. The Zephyrians had been the most vocal about humanity's primitive nature, their delegate particularly insulting during the council session. Their civilization controlled 67 star systems and considered themselves masters of biotechnology and genetic manipulation. They had never suspected that the asteroid that had been slowly drifting through their outer system for the past 8 years was actually a human surveillance platform, or that it contained enough antimatter to sterilize a planet. The Prometheus station designated Zephyr 1 activated its primary systems and immediately began broadcasting on every frequency the Zephyrians used for communication. The message was simple, delivered in perfect Zephyrian biolinguistic patterns that should have been impossible for humans to understand, let alone replicate. Attention Zephyrian Command Authority. This is the human star fleet. Your delegation chose to ridicule our species and imprison us within our home system. This was a mistake. You have 60 seconds to evacuate all military vessels from your home system. This is your only warning. On Zephyria Prime, alarms began screaming across the planet's defense network. The impossible had happened. A human message, delivered in their most sacred and secret language, had somehow bypassed every security system they possessed. Zephyrian military commander Thexalon felt its gas-filled command chamber pressurized to emergency levels as reports flooded in from across the system. Sir, unknown contact in outer system broadcasting on classified frequencies. Defense fleet reports ready to engage. Bioscanners show no life signs from the contact. Weapons, systems charging. Thexalon's tentacles moved in patterns of command authority. All units, converge on the intruder. capture it for study. How did these primitives develop such communication abilities? 59 seconds later, the Prometheus station activated its primary weapon system and demonstrated exactly how primitive humanity actually was. The device itself was elegantly simple: a magnetic containment field that held exactly 1.2 kilograms of antimatter. When the field collapsed, matter and antimatter annihilated each other with perfect efficiency, releasing energy equivalent to a small star going supernova. The flash could be seen from every planet in the Zephyrian system. When the light faded, the entire Zephyrian defense fleet had simply ceased to exist. 47 warships that had collectively controlled space lanes across 16 sectors had been vaporized in an instant. The blast wave continued outward, past the outer planets, into interstellar space, carrying a message that would be detected by sensor networks throughout the galaxy. Humanity had weapons that could destroy entire fleets with a single shot. Simultaneously, similar events began unfolding across known space. In the Krugen home system, the massive space stations that controlled their empire's industrial output suddenly found themselves surrounded by ships that hadn't been there moments before. Vessels that moved without any visible propulsion system, that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, that seemed to ignore the fundamental laws of physics. The Krugen Defense Authority's first indication of attack came when their primary command station simply vanished. One moment it was there, a massive structure housing 30,000 personnel and coordinating military activities across 17 sectors. The next moment, empty space. The human ships responsible flickered back into normal space long enough to broadcast a message. Krugen Military Command, this is the human Star Fleet. Your delegate called our achievements stumbling steps of an infant. We disagree. You have 30 minutes to withdraw all military vessels to planetary orbit. Any ship that attempts to leave the system will be destroyed. Then the ships vanished again, leaving the Krugen forces staring at empty space and trying to understand how an enemy could simply erase a space station without any visible weapon discharge. The answer, if they had known it, would have terrified them even more than the attack itself. The humans hadn't destroyed the station. They had moved it, folded space-time around it, and transported it instantly to a location 300 light-years away, where it would serve as a very clear demonstration of human capabilities. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated with mechanical precision. The hegemony's spider-like delegates had mocked humanity's territorial nature and violent history. They discovered that humans had been monitoring their secret slave-trading operations in the Rim territories for 15 years. Every ship, every station, every hidden facility involved in the trafficking of sentient beings simply disappeared. The beings held as slaves found themselves mysteriously transported to their home worlds, along with complete documentation of hegemony crimes. The Viridian Council had dismissed human technology as primitive fusion-based propulsion. They learned that humans had cracked the secret of zero-point energy extraction 20 years ago and had been powering their hidden fleet with artificial black holes that could provide unlimited energy for thousands of years. Species after species discovered that their military forces, their secret installations, their carefully guarded trade routes, and their hidden weapon stockpiles had been under human observation for decades. Assets they thought were secure vanished. Defenses they believed were impregnable proved useless against technology that seemed to violate known physics. But the most shocking revelation came when the first human fleet decloaked in orbit around Nexus Station, the seat of Galactic Council power. The station was a marvel of engineering, an artificial world built at the gravitational balance point between 3 stars. It housed the representatives of 147 species and was protected by defensive systems that could allegedly stop an entire invasion fleet. 50 human ships appeared around it without triggering a single sensor. Council Prime Zarathul was in emergency session with the surviving delegates when the message came through on every communication system in the station simultaneously. Galactic Council, this is Admiral Marcus Torres, commanding the human star fleet. 74 hours ago, you dismissed our species as primitive. You caged us within our home system. You declared us unworthy of your consideration. The Prime's form flickered between colors that had no name as it tried to process what was happening. In the past hour, we have demonstrated our actual capabilities. We have eliminated or neutralized The military forces of every species that voted for our quarantine. We have shut down illegal operations that violated galactic law while you looked the other way. We have proven that your understanding of human technology was not merely incomplete, but laughably inadequate. Around the emergency session chamber, delegates who had been laughing at humanity's primitiveness 24 hours earlier now sat in stunned silence. You want to know what makes humans different? Torres continued. While you spent millions of years perfecting what you already knew, we spent 73 years learning everything we could about you. While you assumed our limitations matched our public displays, we built technology in secret that your science says should be impossible. While you thought you were judging us, we were judging you. The Zephyrian delegate, its tentacles trembling with what the translation matrix rendered as terror, managed to speak. What do you want? Torres's voice carried clearly through the station's speakers, calm and implacable. What we want is very simple. We want the Council to reconsider its position on humanity. We want the quarantine lifted. We want full membership with voting rights. And we want all of this to happen within the next 6 hours. And if we refuse? The Krugan delegate asked, its rocky voice cracking with stress. If you refuse, Torres replied, then we will continue demonstrating human capabilities until you change your minds. We have identified approximately 40,000 Council military assets across the galaxy. We have eliminated roughly 2% of them in the past hour. We are prepared to continue this demonstration at the rate of 5% per hour until you reach a different conclusion. The chamber fell silent, except for the sound of various species' breathing apparatus and life support systems. You see, Torres continued, you made one critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that a primitive species would show you all their capabilities. You assumed that beings who had been confined to one solar system couldn't possibly have developed interstellar technology. You assumed that we were as naive and straightforward as we appeared. Council Prime Zarathul found its voice, though the words came out as barely more than a whisper. How? It asked. How did you develop such technology without our knowledge? Torres's response carried a tone that might have been amusement. Prime. Humanity has been at war for most of its recorded history. We know something that your peaceful civilizations seem to have forgotten. When survival is at stake, there is no such thing as impossible. We didn't develop this technology despite our violent nature. We developed it because of it. The Admiral's voice grew quieter, more intimate, as if he were sharing a secret. Did you really think a species that went from horse-drawn carriages to moon landings in 60 years would be content with chemical rockets forever? Did you imagine that beings who unlocked the power of the atom within a century of discovering electricity would stop there? Did you believe that people who had never been given anything freely would simply accept your restrictions? Around the chamber, delegates began to understand the magnitude of their miscalculation. You observed our public space program and thought you understood our capabilities. What you actually observed was our marketing department. While NASA was launching chemical rockets for your sensors to detect, our real space program was learning how to fold space-time itself. While you watched us build fusion reactors, our scientists were already harvesting vacuum energy and creating artificial gravity wells. Torres paused, letting the implications sink in. Every species you represent made the same mistake. You assumed that a young civilization would be honest about its capabilities. You forgot that survival often depends on letting your enemies underestimate you. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. Outside Nexus Station, 50 human ships hung motionless in space, their hulls reflecting no light, their energy signatures undetectable by any known sensor technology. Ships that shouldn't exist, operated by a species that had supposedly never left its home system. Council Prime Zarathul looked around the chamber at delegates whose civilizations had just been thoroughly and comprehensively outmaneuvered by the primitive species they had dismissed. For the first time in millions of years of galactic politics, nobody had any idea what to do next. 6 hours and 14 minutes after Admiral Torres issued his ultimatum, Ambassador Sarah Chen walked back into the Galactic Council chamber. This time, the atmosphere was very different. Where before there had been contempt and mockery, now there was a silence so profound it seemed to press against her eardrums. The delegates who had laughed at humanity's primitiveness now watched her every movement with the kind of careful attention usually reserved for handling unstable explosives. Council Prime Zarathul's form had shifted to deep purple shot through with veins of silver colors that Sarah's briefing materials identified as indicating extreme stress and uncertainty. The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles hung motionless in its methane sphere, completely still for the first time since Sarah had met the species. The massive Krugan representative seemed to have retracted deeper into its rocky shell, while the hegemony delegate's usually bright emerald eyes had dimmed to almost black. Sarah took her place at the central podium and looked around the chamber with calm professionalism. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the translation matrix. "Honored delegates," she began. "I have been asked to return to clarify humanity's position and to hear the Council's response to Admiral Torres's presentation." The word presentation hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the chamber knew what Torres had actually delivered was a systematic dismantling of galactic military power. But calling it a presentation was somehow more terrifying than calling it an attack. Council Prime Zarathul's form flickered as it struggled to find words. When it finally spoke, its mental voice carried none of the condescension that had marked their previous interaction. "Ambassador Chen," the Prime said carefully, "the Council requires clarification on several matters before we can proceed. First, the nature and extent of human technology appears to have been misrepresented during your previous appearance." Sarah's expression remained neutral. "I don't recall making any misrepresentations, Prime. When asked about our capabilities, I described our adaptability, our determination, and our innovative approach to problem solving. I believe recent events have demonstrated the accuracy of those statements." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate finally moved, its tentacles forming shapes that the translation matrix rendered as "request for explanation." "You stated that your species used fusion propulsion," it said, its wind-like voice tighter than before. "Our observations confirmed this. Yet your Admiral's forces demonstrated technology that appears to violate known physical laws." Sarah nodded as if this were a perfectly reasonable question. "Your observations were correct. Our public space program does indeed use fusion propulsion. NASA, our civilian space agency, has been quite proud of their achievements in that area." She paused, letting the implications of the word "civilian" sink in. "However," she continued, "I don't recall anyone asking about our private space program, or our military space program, or our experimental physics program. You observed what we chose to show you and assumed that was everything we had." The Krugan delegate's rocky hide shifted with what the translation matrix indicated was growing agitation. "You deceived us," it rumbled. "You deliberately misled the Council about your technological capabilities." Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. "Did we?" I reviewed the transcripts of our previous session. At no point did anyone ask me directly about our military capabilities, our experimental technologies, or our classified research programs. You asked about our achievements in space, and I showed you our public achievements. You drew your own conclusions about what those achievements represented. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as delegates tried to speak simultaneously. Sarah waited patiently for the Prime to restore order. "The Council operates under the assumption of honest disclosure," the Prime said with forced calm. "When civilizations request membership, they present their full technological and military capabilities for assessment." "Do they?" Sarah asked quietly. "All of them?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah activated her podium display, and images began appearing in the air above the chamber. "These are Zephyrian military installations that we've been monitoring for the past 12 years, she said matter-of-factly. "Installations that don't appear in any of your disclosure documents to the Council. Biological weapon research facilities hidden in dead systems. Genetic manipulation experiments performed on unwilling subjects. Military technology development that violates at least 14 different galactic treaties." The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles moved in patterns that the translation matrix couldn't parse, but the meaning was clear enough. Sarah's display shifted to new images. "These are Krugan Empire operations in the Rim territories. forced annexation of smaller civilizations through economic warfare, military intimidation of species that refuse to accept Krugan trade agreements, strip mining operations on inhabited worlds that violate Council environmental accords. The Krugan delegate started to speak, but Sarah continued without pause. And these are hegemony slave trading operations that we've documented across 17 sectors, kidnapping and trafficking of sentient beings, forced labor camps, and the systematic exploitation of species that lack the technology to defend themselves. She turned off the display and looked around the chamber. So please don't talk to me about honest disclosure. Every major species in this chamber has hidden capabilities, secret operations, and undisclosed military assets. The only difference is that our hidden capabilities proved to be more extensive than yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Council Prime Zarathul's form shifted to colors that suggested deep thought and calculation. When it spoke again, its mental voice was carefully controlled. What does humanity want? Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. As I stated in my previous appearance, we want membership in the Galactic Council. Full membership, with voting rights and access to Council resources and technologies. Given recent events, the hegemony delegate said, its mandibles clicking nervously, it appears that humanity already possesses technologies superior to anything the Council has to offer. In some areas, yes, Sarah agreed. But the galaxy is large and full of wonders we haven't yet discovered. We're particularly interested in your medical technologies, your terraforming techniques, and your diplomatic protocols for peaceful contact with newly discovered species. The last point hit home with several delegates. After what humanity had just demonstrated, their interest in peaceful contact protocols was more than a little ominous. There are concerns, the Prime said slowly, about humanity's apparent predisposition toward military solutions. Sarah's expression hardened. Let me be very clear about something, Prime. What happened in the past 6 hours wasn't humanity's predisposition toward military solutions. It was humanity's response to being caged and dismissed by species that should have known better. She gestured toward the viewing wall, where the stars stretched out in all directions. Do you see any enslaved populations in human space? Do you see any conquered civilizations forced to labor for our benefit? Do you see any worlds stripped bare of resources to feed human industry? She waited, but no one answered. The answer is no, because they don't exist. In 73 years of space exploration, humanity has never enslaved another species, never conquered another civilization, never committed genocide for economic gain. Can every species in this chamber say the same? The question hung in the air like a judgment. Our military actions today were precise, targeted, and designed to minimize casualties while demonstrating capability. We could have destroyed every Council world. We could have eliminated every military force in the galaxy. We could have reduced your civilizations to ash and taken what we wanted from the ruins. Sarah's voice grew quiet and deadly serious. We chose not to. We eliminated military assets while preserving lives. We targeted oppressive operations while protecting the innocent. We demonstrated overwhelming power while showing restraint. This isn't the behavior of a warlike species, Prime. This is the behavior of a species that understands the difference between capability and intention. Council Prime Zarathul was silent for a long moment, its form cycling through colors that suggested rapid calculation. The Council must deliberate, it finally said. The implications of humanity's presentation require careful consideration. Of course, Sarah agreed. But I should point out that Admiral Torres's deadline has expired. Our military assets remain active and on station throughout the galaxy. Every moment the Council spends deliberating is a moment that the galactic balance of power continues to shift in humanity's favor. The threat was delivered with diplomatic politeness, but it was still unmistakably a threat. How long do we have? The Krugan delegate asked bluntly. Sarah consulted her chronometer. I'm authorized to extend the deadline by 24 hours. After that, Admiral Torres will assume that the Council's answer is no and will proceed accordingly. Proceed how? The Zephyrian delegate asked, its tentacles trembling. Sarah's smile was perfectly diplomatic and absolutely terrifying. Admiral Torres is a military officer, not a diplomat. His instructions regarding further delays were quite specific, but not suitable for repetition in diplomatic channels. She turned to leave, then paused, and looked back. I should mention one other thing. While you've been deliberating, our intelligence services have been busy. We now have complete documentation of every council member's classified military capabilities, secret operations, and hidden technological developments. This information will be made public if anything unfortunate happens to our diplomatic mission or our home system. The implications of that statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. Additionally, Sarah continued conversationally, we've identified the command structures, communication networks, and strategic assets of every major galactic civilization. This information is currently stored in automated systems that will take appropriate action if they don't receive regular confirmation signals from our leadership. She headed for the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. One last thought, she called over her shoulder. Humanity has waited 73 years for this opportunity. We've been patient, careful, and thorough in our preparations. We're prepared to wait 24 more hours for your decision. After that, she shrugged elegantly. After that, we stop asking for permission and start taking what we need. The door closed behind her with a soft whisper, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy alone with their thoughts. 18 hours later, Council Prime Zarathul stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that would reshape galactic politics for the next 1,000 years. The Galactic Council recognizes the human species as a spacefaring civilization. Full membership is granted with immediate effect. All quarantine restrictions on the Sol system are hereby lifted. Furthermore, given humanity's demonstrated technological capabilities, they are granted permanent seats on the Council Security Committee and the Advanced Technology Review Board. The vote was unanimous. After all, nobody wanted to find out what would happen if they voted no. 2 days later, Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in her new office in the Council headquarters, reviewing her first official briefing as a full Council member. The reports made for fascinating reading. The Zephyrian Empire had voluntarily shut down all of its illegal research facilities. The Krugan Empire had begun negotiating independence agreements with its unwilling territories, and the hegemony had released all enslaved populations and was paying massive reparations. Amazing how quickly civilizations could reform themselves when properly motivated. Her communications console chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Torres. Congratulations on the successful conclusion of negotiations, Ambassador. All Prometheus assets remain on station and ready for deployment as needed. How does it feel to be proven right? 1. Sarah smiled as she composed her reply. Admiral, when I told the Council that humans never accept that something is impossible, I wasn't making a threat. I was making a promise. Today, the galaxy learned the difference. She looked out her office window at the vast expanse of space that was now officially open to human exploration and development. Somewhere out there, human ships were already moving toward distant stars that had been forbidden to them just days before. The Council had ridiculed Earth and tried to cage humanity in their home system. They had forgotten that cages only work if the prisoner doesn't have the key. And humanity, it turned out, had been carrying keys all along.